We're recording this for our friends at Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, and for our YouTube channel as well. This is our business law class here at Velma Jackson. I have a room full with me, and we've looked at, how do you pronounce your company's name?
Idemia.
Okay, so we looked at the Idemia website, saw some of the things that they do, and I was explaining to them before you came on that you are not a technology expert.
No, I'm actually like the anti-technology person.
But we have talked about the lawmaking process, and we're getting into contracts. I know Idemia has tons of government contracts and other private contracts. When these laws are made by Congress, that's where you come in, and you're going. You really deal with the government relations on that. But before we get into all that, let's talk about your background, starting in Taylorsville, Mississippi. Now getting all the way to Washington, D.C., home of the Tartars.
That is right. Yep. Grew up in Taylorsville, went to Taylorsville High School. Actually met you, I guess. Would that have been
Mississippi College?
Just during college at Mississippi College. I was trying to think if we had a Lions band overlap, but I couldn't remember.
No,
you were not in Lions band. Okay. Well, you're musical, so I thought I just couldn't remember if we had actually crossed paths before college, but ended up at Mississippi College, studying communications, minored in political science, graduated from there, did a graduate degree from the University of Southern Miss, and then have been in some form of I would say like a political / government type job for pretty much every job since college, with the exception of one. I worked in tourism right out of college, but still worked with a lot of elected officials in the legislature, even during that job. So, and then stayed in Mississippi all the way up until 2020, and was involved in some national political work in 2020 that ultimately brought me to DC.
Wow.
So my family, we relocated here and have been here. This is, I guess, the second full year of Beltway life. We actually live down by Mount Vernon. For any of you who've ever done a trip to DC, we could walk to the Mount Vernon estate if we wanted to. So we're kind of a little bit outside the city, but still in the middle of all the action. If you are interested in government and Congress and all those things, we're certainly in the middle of all that excitement.
Yeah, the DMV is not, I don't think people understand how big that metro area is. It is literally one of the largest metro areas in the world. So yeah, if you want to get to a big city, that could be a good one to get to. Now let's talk about what you do at Idemia. So you are, obviously Idemia is a technology company. I mean, it's really cool, some of the stuff that you guys make, a lot of security software, a lot of identity software, stuff for cybersecurity, stuff for surveillance. I mean, it is really cutting edge technology, but that's not anything you do as far as your job. And you just said that yourself.
How many folks in your class, what ages are the students in your class?
I have a 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade.
So for any of you guys who have a driver's license from the state of Mississippi in your wallet right now, our company produced those driver's licenses. We do that in 40 states in the U.S., but we also, if you happen to have a passport, if you've traveled internationally, we printed that passport on behalf of the State Department. Wow. And we do that type of work all over the world. So we're an international company, but most people know us for that credential, that identity credential, the physical card that you've been issued that's supposed to say you are who you say you are. Wow. And so from it is cool. But then in addition to that, we also, a different division, but within our company, we produce all of the credit and debit cards that are issued in the US. So we have a different factory facility that does this in the fintech space, if you will. So for anybody who's been following how difficult it is to buy a new car these days because of the chip shortage, that's obviously impacting our company as well, because now all of the debit and credit cards in the US are chip based. So that's another interesting, we're all in your wallet, which is, most people don't think about that. But then in addition, Mississippi is also in the cutting edge because they are one of only 4 states that have launched a mobile driver's license. So if you haven't gone out to the app store and grabbed that Mississippi mobile driver's license app that you can have on your phone, it actually takes the physical card that we create for the Department of Public Safety and creates it into a mobile driver's license. Wow. And so what we're working, the next generation of what you're going to see from that is like the TSA is a big company that we work with. The next time you fly on an airplane, I want you to notice the equipment as you walk up to that security checkpoint there in Jackson or Gulfport or New Orleans, wherever you're flying out of. You'll see the Idemia logo over all on all that machinery. It's called a credential authenticating technology. Wow. And because we're the company that generates the majority of the IDs in the US, we also produce machines that verify those identities as well, making sure that they are the real deal and that you're not out there using a fake ID to try to board an airplane. So, and then out in Arizona, we're piloting right now with TSA and Apple, where you're actually going to be able to use that mobile driver's license that's on your phone or maybe on your Apple wallet. I mean, on your iPhone. No, sorry, your Apple Watch. You're going to be able to scan your ID from either your phone or your watch, as opposed to having to get that driver's license out of your wallet.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So obviously that's what your company does, but that's not your background. So tell us a little about your role, because, you know, we've had speakers on here. We've actually had a state representative this week talk about how important it is to know what's going on at the state and federal government level, because it really affects business, and it affects how decisions are made by business, and it affects the state and national economy. So where do you come into play when it comes to your government relations that you have for Idemia?
Sure. So I oversee a department that manages our relationships with government, both appointed and elected officials, at the federal and state and local level. So members of Congress, all the federal agencies, all of your state legislatures, your governors, lieutenant governors, and then it extends out to those people like Commissioner Sean Tyndall, who's appointed to be over the Department of Public Safety in Mississippi. So our department is responsible for making sure that the company is on solid footing with all of those folks, that we are doing a good job communicating. We read a lot of bills this time of year. Certainly we get, tracking legislation all over the country that impacts some part of the work that we do. And then we're weighing in with lawmakers to make sure that they understand how this legislation that they've proposed, or maybe that they're supportive of, would impact, just that identity space, if you will.
Yeah, because, obviously we got all teenagers here, but they don't realize that, when you work for these corporations, the laws that are made at the state, local, and national level can affect how they do business. It can affect
Sure.
how stuff is produced. It can affect what materials are used. It can affect how many hours people can work. So it's important to really be up on that. And like I said, we've gone through the lawmaking process, but it's important for companies and people like you to make sure that companies and government are working together, because it really does affect our entire economy.
So you'll see, guys, as you're applying for jobs, maybe some of you've got some part-time jobs now, typically in that onboarding process, you're having to show some form of identity. In some jobs that you may have, it may even go so far as to prove whether or not you're a U.S. citizen. And so those are the types of documents and the types of policy that we certainly pay attention to. And taking that a step further, some of the things that you'll likely encounter, I mean, just think about any time that you do business of any sort, whether it's with the government or whether it's with a private business, if you are asked to show a form of identification, we care about what that policy looks like.
Absolutely.
The big thing that you're going to see in Mississippi that we haven't seen before now is going to be, this medical marijuana that's passed in Mississippi. There's going to have to be a way for a dispensary to validate that a person is who they say they are. And not only that they're who they say they are, but that they have a valid prescription from a provider who can write that. That's, we were very, we were very tuned in to what Mississippi was doing. And of course, we're seeing that across the country as well. Another interesting, aspect that people don't think about on the commercial side is, being able to do transactions with government that don't require you to go in person to do it. The pandemic really showed folks what a gap we have there between basic services, filing for an unemployment claim. If you don't have a job, the pandemic took away your job and you need to get a government benefit, but those government offices are shut down. How do we still do business? How does the government still do what they're obligated to do on behalf of their citizens, while also, making sure that we don't have people falsely applying for unemployment benefits or pretending to be people that they aren't. So there's a lot of, that type of transactional work that, a lot of people just think about, oh, you need to see my ID. You need to see that I'm 18. You need to see that I'm 21 to do whatever it is you're trying to do. And, it's our job to kind of understand, the policies and the regulations behind what's requiring you to show that ID, and then helping, whether it be government or the private sector, create a pathway, to be able to use your ID. And I'll tell you, yesterday I spent the better part of 2 hours in a conversation with a state police in a different state, not Mississippi, where we're trying to figure out, like, how does a state policeman accept a mobile driver's license on the side of the road if someone gets pulled over and they don't have their physical card anymore? Wow. And that, like, just thinking through the technical requirements that we're going to have to figure out in order to do that, and do it where the officer can still have access to both of his hands. So in case, there is a situation on the side of the road and he has to pull out his gun or a taser or handcuff, he's not fumbling around also trying to scan someone's driver's license to see. So a lot of, like, operational processes that we have to work through when you're an industry leader in a space like this, and you're the ones that are having to figure it out for the first time. There's a lot of, brainstorming that goes into what we do. And we have a pretty big, R&D center that helps us support all this.
Yeah. And I don't even think, and that's obviously workplace safety issues where, and I've told these kids all the time, workplace safety is a big deal when you become an employee. So yeah, there may be cutting edge technology, but if somebody's not safe at work, that's policies that come into play to make sure that everybody's protected.
That's right.
Able to use the technology. Now, I don't know how much you deal with contracts, but I know your company has a lot of contracts. I'm sure you've seen a lot of contracts, and that's really what we're about to get into here in this class. So,
sure.
So when, but how, and I know you deal with contracts a lot more than I do, but, as somebody in a legal type field, I know you see a lot. So what
Sure.
are some things that kids need to see and understand what a contract entails, and that once you sign it, unless it is, say, it's stating for you to do something illegal, you're pretty much locked into it.
So we have a whole division dedicated to contracts. Everybody is kind of qualified for their level of expertise based on whether they work in federal contracting or state and local contracting. They can be kind of different animals. We are a really large government contractor. So what that means, guys, is that there are functions that the government does that they are able to hire a private company to do on their behalf. And so that's when you hear people mention government contractors, or I work for a government contractor, that's what they mean. And so there are laws that allow for contracting to be done between the private sector and the government. And so when we're doing that work, we're doing it on behalf of the government that we're working for. So, up until just a couple of years ago, you would oftentimes not even really see the company's name that was being contracted to do that. We operated as if it were just the government doing business. And we still do that. I mean, we run the TSA pre-check program for TSA. Yeah. We helped create that. We actually, that program was born in our Franklin, Tennessee office, back in, I guess, maybe 2013 was when TSA PreCheck started. And our company actually created that program with TSA. So when you go to that website, you think you're going to TSA.gov, and you are, but when you click on that link to enroll in the TSA PreCheck program, that's actually kicking you back over to our site. We're doing that enrollment. We are one of the 13 channelers for the FBI in the country. So once we get that information, we're pinging that criminal justice information database, seeing what that criminal history looks like, if any. And then we're kicking that back over to TSA to ultimately adjudicate whether or not someone is, can be TSA pre-checked or not. And so in order to do that, we have a really large contract with TSA. And there have been modifications over the years to that contract. In some cases, you may have a company or an agency that wants you to do more than what you're doing today. And so that requires a modification to a contract. In some instances, there may be some major change that's happened, whether with how people do business or new technology. And so it may require a modification to lessen what you do. But I will tell you, from a business standpoint, you want those contracts in place. You want them as iron proof as possible, because if for some reason, someone that you have a contract with no longer wants to do whatever it is they have contracted with you to do, if you're going to have any opportunity to make up the difference of what maybe you are losing in terms of revenue, you're going to need a contract to be able to prove how you were harmed in that situation. And so making sure, but I will tell you, Greg, I was actually kind of surprised. You don't have to be a lawyer to do contracts. There are plenty of folks in corporations that are trained in the language of contracts and how to structure contracts and how to negotiate them. That, I think for a long time, I thought that in order to write up a contract, you had to be a lawyer. And I'm learning that that's not the case, that there are folks that are just really good attention to detail people, that are good negotiators, that can be really helpful in drafting and executing contracts. And so, it's definitely a field that a lot of folks in the government contracting space need good people to be able to develop, to draft and execute good contracts.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because I tell these kids all the time, even if it's a contract between you and an employer, just with two people, it's important to really pay attention to the language of that. If you're buying a home, buying a business, buying land, doing a service for a government agency, if people aren't paying you what you signed for, or you're doing more than what you've agreed to do, it's important to really have that in writing, because that's what's enforceable in a court.
Yep. And if you're going to engage in a contract and you don't necessarily feel like you understand everything that's in it, it's definitely something you need to get some outside help on, whether you do hire an attorney to look at it for you, or you just go to a friend or a family member that maybe does contracts or understands contracts. Make sure that you're understanding, what is expected of you in that contract and what is expected of whomever you're signing it with, and make sure that everybody's on the same page, because, the smallest of words can make really big differences in interpreting a contract, if you ever have to challenge that contract in a court of law.
And especially in your industry, we're talking millions and millions of dollars.
Absolutely. So you want to make sure that you've done your homework and due diligence, and that there's a document in front of you that not only you understand, but you believe that you can live up to whatever your end of the bargain is in there.
Yeah, big time. Well, I do have some questions from the students, and these are tough. But we'll start with this one. This is a junior, Shania Jackson. She's one of our cheerleaders. You were a cheerleader at Taylorsville High School. So she's a
Shania, good to see you.
And she asked, obviously you're involved in a lot of things, but how do you multitask and stay focused?
So a lot of folks will say that there is no such thing as a good multitasker. And I think I used to not believe that, but the older I get, the harder it is to stay focused and get a lot of stuff done. But I'm a real big believer in a task list. I keep kind of a running one with, projected deadlines on it. And I'm constantly revisiting that throughout the day, throughout the week, trying to stay organized and calendared. I will tell you, one of the worst things that I've observed with pandemic life and post-pandemic life has been this over scheduling of meetings, and because everyone's really embraced this virtual workplace. And so now I feel like I'm scheduled out every 30 minutes of the day. And so I've started kind of taking back control of my calendar and blocking out times where I actually have time to work on projects and to, revisit my to-do list, because I am pulled in a million different directions every day. And there's a lot of very important issues that we're working on that, sometimes there just aren't enough hours in the day. So you got to make sure that you don't overcommit. You have to learn how to say no. That's certainly something important to do. And then, do a good job of organizing your time and scheduling time to where you actually have time to work and have time to make the phone calls that you need to make. And, and then for me, it's also just huddling with the rest of my team, making sure that we're all on the same page, because it's great to have folks that you work with that can help take some of that workload off. But, if you're so busy during the day that you don't have time to connect with them and make sure that everybody's kind of working towards the same goal, that's a challenge as well. So
big time. Now, one thing I forgot to ask about this, at the beginning of this year, we had another speaker that talked about the importance of communication, and she calls it speak big. And I know you have a degree in communication, and I tell these kids all the time, and everybody watching later as well, these companies, they may be a technology company, but they have to have somebody that can sell. They have to have somebody that can communicate. So how important are you seeing these skills be in any type of industry?
Yeah, communication is, look, that's going to be the key to your life. It's not just going to be the key to your job. Being able to communicate with your friends, with your family members, with a future spouse down the road, with your boss, with people that you work with. Making sure that everyone understands like where you're coming from, what those expectations are, what the next steps are, who's going to be responsible for what part of the process, and then how you're going to wrap this thing up in the end once it's all taken care of and everybody's done their part. And I'll be honest, the busier you get at work, I feel like this is one of those things that really you let yourself down by not taking that extra 5 minutes to shoot that email out to the team to let them know what you're working on. So just figuring out kind of what everybody's communication skill, like what their skill level is going to be, and kind of that cadence that you're going to communicate back and forth as to what's happening. For me, I have found that it is just is it may not be the most professional way, but having just text message groups that because I may be on the phone with someone for an hour, but if I can keep that group updated via text message about what the takeaways were from that call that I'm on, then I don't it and don't do it 2 hours from now, and it's more relevant because it's in real time. So but I will tell you, like, having good writing skills, being able to craft an email that doesn't take you 4 hours to write, being able to speak clearly, being able to speak to your boss and your employer clearly, but also being able to articulate kind of what your needs and wants are out of a situation or out of your job, being able to negotiate things like your performance review and your merit increases on your job, like all of those things. If you're unable to craft a compelling argument and then deliver it, in whether it's in written form or spoken form, that's important. And so don't, just because you may like math or like science and you're not necessarily going to be on like the English and that side of the house, the liberal arts side of the house, you should still focus on having good communication skills and work on being a good writer and a good speaker, and challenge yourself to have opportunities to practice those skills, because it's definitely a part of your everyday life, no matter what field you go into.
Yeah, and it's like I said, everybody isn't I know you're real comfortable speaking in groups. I am as well. Even if you're not like that, you still got to be able to talk to who you're dealing with. So that's extremely important. I forgot to mention that. But this is Jamonica Luckett, and she's a senior. And you didn't talk about this, but she asked, what inspired you to get into this field?
So I worked on my first political campaign in the second grade. So a guy from our hometown was running for statewide office, and he ended up winning, and was somebody, of course, I grew up in a small place, so everybody knew everybody. And I actually went to the Neshoba County Fair in the second grade, and and handed out flyers and cookies on his behalf. And I think it just kind of stuck with me. I was active in campaigns and politics at obviously a pretty small level all growing up. My husband and I actually started dating in 1996 on election night. Now I was a baby then, so I don't even want you to all think about how old that would make me if we started dating in 1996. But we were at a friend of ours election night party who'd run for Congress, and we started dating. It's just look, I love, I'm super competitive. I like adrenaline type work. It's just always kind of been my thing. And so political campaigns definitely give you that adrenaline that you're looking for. And they're just really strategic, and you just get an opportunity to do a lot of really cool stuff. And then, it's also a little bit of public service once you get through the campaign part. These people are running to give back to their communities, whether that be their local area through a legislator or a county or local official, or statewide or at the federal level. So I think I've just always known. But I did do an internship at the end of my sophomore year in college for then Governor Ronnie Musgrove. I interned in his communications department. I was 18 years old, I guess, 19 years old when I did that. I'll tell y'all a quick funny story. So being from a small town, and of course this was also 2002, so we didn't have quite the TV coverage of press conferences and that just wasn't really a thing as much, I don't think, back then. Maybe it was, but it wasn't something we saw as like people from a small town. And so my very first day in the governor's office, the team sent me to cover a press conference. And I sort of thought that I knew what that would be like, but I wasn't 100% sure. And I needed, one of my jobs was to record the press conference, like the audio of I had a little recorder, like, how like reporters used to carry around with them before we could record things on our phone. And I showed up a little bit early to this press conference because, I didn't want to be late. Now that habit has since gone away, and I'm late for everything these days. But I show up and I somehow managed to work myself, not as an observer at this press conference, but as a participant, because I had gotten there a little bit too early and I was scared to tell them who I was or who I worked for. And so I ended up standing up behind then the Attorney General as a participant in his press conference, and wouldn't introduce myself, and ended up on the front page of the Clarion Ledger on day 2 of my internship, above the fold in the paper, as an unidentified participant in the press conference. And it was mortifying. But the governor did call me, and that day, because I really thought they would just, send me home that day, never to come back. And he told me that they were strongly considering me for the state's espionage unit, and so that I had done a really good job. But
he really was. He really is one of the nicest people, isn't he?
He is a great guy.
Now this is Brandon Lemon. He's a senior, and he asked, "What are some laws that you would like to see in order to help your business?"
Yeah. So for us, being a government contractor, there's a lot of things that affect us. But I will tell you, there's something that I've been working on really closely for the last year in Congress is, if any of you have parents that maybe work around shipyards or anywhere over in Vicksburg around the ports, or happen to drive like an 18-wheeler truck, there are 2 certifications that you might be familiar with. One is called the Transportation Worker, a TWIC program, and then you've got the HME program, which is a Hazardous Materials credential, and you have to have those if you work around those spaces. So our company does the enrollments for those folks. And there's been some legislation legislation that we've been pushing for the last year that would create some guardrails around those programs to make sure that, there's plenty of access across the country for people who do those jobs to get out to those places and get the credentials that they need. Because as you can imagine, if you need to drive a truck for a company that's going to carry hazardous materials and you have to drive several hours to go and get that certification before you can even start to work, that's a burden on folks
Absolutely.
that are trying to do a job and get a paycheck. And so there's some potential changes around how folks enroll that has the potential to limit access for that. And so we've been working to push some legislation that put some guardrails around that. And it's really important to us, but also we feel like it's really important, to folks back home in Mississippi and across the country that have those types of jobs and need those types of certifications.
Cool. And that's a great answer, because Brandon comes from a truck driver family, so he really liked that answer.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's really good. But we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much. I know you've got a crazy schedule. But before we go, you're from small town Mississippi, rural Smith County. We're in a rural area as well, but yeah, you are living the life up there. And I'm so happy for you. You're just doing some awesome stuff. But everybody here with me now is also from rural Mississippi, but yet you were able to get a great degree and go up and work in our nation's capital. So what can they do coming from similar circumstances in the same state to be just as successful as you?
Sure. I mean, guys, I will never be the smartest person in a room. I sucked at taking standardized tests, probably like some of you struggle with. College I was there way more for the social activities than I was the test and the note taking. I mean, I went to class, don't get me wrong. Mississippi College is pretty strict about those things, but I was much more interested in the swap that was going to happen that night or the formal that weekend. And, but it's all about just hard work, no matter if you got a 36 on the ACT or if you're struggling to get a 16 on the ACT, you find things that you're passionate about that make you excited to learn about them. And you work really hard to get there, and you put in all the extra effort, whether that means, volunteering at some organization that does a type of work that you want to do, getting an internship once you get out of high school and into college, whether that's a 2-year college, a technical school, a 4-year university, whatever that looks like. For me, it was just, I never had the whole thing planned out necessarily, but I will tell you, I mean, after my internship, that second year of college, I knew for sure that I wanted to be a comms director and a spokesperson for a statewide elected official. And it took me a couple of steps to get there, but I did, and I loved it. I knew that I loved working on campaigns, and I worked on some really small ones that most people would consider insignificant. And I didn't always get paid to do that. Some of that I did in my free time. And then I got to do things like run, a top 5 historic race in the country one year and win it. And so, that opens doors. And for me, it's a lot of what I do is relationship based. It's people based, but then it's just that hard work ethic. I mean, no matter what field you choose, what career path you want to go down, I mean, I have all the confidence that you guys can do anything that you put your mind to. But y'all are also, while Greg and I didn't necessarily have as much of this when we were coming up through school, y'all have got social media and networks now. You can reach out to folks on LinkedIn that do a job that you think you might want to do, and you would be surprised at the number of people that will write you back, that will be willing to jump on a Zoom with you and tell you what it's like to do the job that they do.
That's how I find a lot of my guests. I find them online. They're like, sure. I mean, it's amazing how willing people are to share their experience.
And they'll tell you what steps they took to get there. And it doesn't mean that you have to take all the same steps that they did, but at least it can kind of give you a loose roadmap of what to follow if you wanted to do what they do. And then, I mean, just find people that do the work that you think you want to do, network with them, ask them for help, get them to take a look at that resume. ask them what types of internships or part-time work they did when they were coming up through school, and just be willing to learn and always show up ready to work, ready to learn something new. You know, get off those phones when you're around folks that can help you learn, you know, a skill or network or connect you with somebody. Really try to be present in the moment, and take advantages of some really cool opportunities that folks like Greg here can help do for you, but also that you can do for yourself. I mean, you have a lot of opportunities and a lot of access to folks through social media. It's one of the better things I feel like social media has brought us. You know, I mean, you know, just use it to your advantage, and don't be scared to try something. And if you end up in a job that you don't like, or that it doesn't like you, whatever the case may be, get a new one. You know, figure out what it is that you do like. So much of our job, our time during the day is spent working. It's not spent playing. And it's not spent with our friends. And so you need to work somewhere that not only you have a passion about doing what it is that company does, but also you enjoy doing it with the people around you. And you may have to do a job for a while that you don't love, but go find one that you do love, and find a company that you do want to work for, and be willing to do, you know, whatever it takes to get in the door and give it a shot. And then once you're in there, you prove yourself and you work hard, and I guarantee you it'll work out for you.
That's awesome. Great stuff. I mean, such a cool story too. And yeah, that is the coolest company you work for, man. I'm jealous. That is some cool stuff you get to deal with every day. But again, thank you for finishing your schedule. Lisa Shoemaker up there in the DMV, from Taylorsville, Mississippi, all the way to our nation's capital. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I will talk to you soon, my friend. Great to see you.
So good to see y'all. Have a great weekend, guys. Thank you.
See ya.